Becky has always been conservative both in her political views and in matters of money. She could be called spotlessly clean because she pulled me to church every Sunday. I have to admit, I loved our life and the plan Becky made for us. I, on the other hand, was not that organized. I wanted to be a good provider, but I didn't always know how to achieve this. Becky seemed like my perfect soul mate, and I was more than happy to follow her plan when it came to our future. Although Becky was exemplary in many ways, she and I had an intense sex life. We didn't experiment wildly in bed, but we explored new topics and openly discussed our fantasies. From time to time, we tried something new, including light elements of bondage, so in the bedroom Becky could not be called conservative. I always thought that we enjoyed each other. Sometimes we made love, and sometimes we indulged in passion, especially after Becky drank her favorite Napa Valley Chardonnay. It never even occurred to me that I might not be enough for her sexually. Standing in the doorway that night and watching her boss have sex with her from behind, I couldn't understand why she wanted someone else. Why was I not the one she needed? As I already said, I was more relaxed by nature than she was. Many of my friends described me as carefree. I may be a little self-centered, but I don't care about politics at all. I dislike both the left and the right equally, and if Becky was frugal with money, I was the complete opposite. We probably wouldn't have saved much if it weren't for her persistence. It seemed like we complemented each other perfectly. My job was to be the lead engineer for a company that designed and supplied various fasteners to manufacturers. It doesn't sound very glamorous, but I found the work exciting and rewarding. Our clients approached us with various problems, and I developed suitable solutions. Becky received a degree in marketing, but for a long time could not find a job in Oklahoma City. She eventually landed a job at a mid-sized advertising agency that primarily served local car dealerships and independent businesses. It was her dream job, and it paid her well. I was happy for her. She led a small team that created advertising campaigns. It was a step up from her previous job in Kansas City, so our move was a success for both of us. You'll probably say that I'm saying this now knowing what happened, but I never liked her bosses. Ken was vice president of customer service and reported directly to Roger, the company's president. At company events, they were both friendly, but it felt like they didn't take me seriously as Becky's husband. They were polite, saying expected things like, "How are you?" or "How do you like Oklahoma City?" but never tried to talk to me about more personal topics. It seemed like they either didn't want to or didn't feel the need to get to know me better. Now I understand why. The answer was right in front of me. Ken pushed into my wife's body, and I still stood paralyzed, unable to utter a word. It was as if invisible hands were holding me in place, forcing me to look at what was happening 10 feet away. The shock paralyzed me for a few moments, but suddenly the invisible shackles disappeared, and I found my voice. I was overcome with anger. "Push up, Ken," I shouted. "I think you can make this prostitute get pleasure one more time." Both turned their heads in my direction. They froze, stopping moving. The look on Becky's face was one of absolute shock. Ken looked furious. "How did you get here?" Ken asked loudly. I had Becky's ID in my hand and held it up to show her. I didn't see the need to explain more. I saw Becky's hand behind her back trying to push Ken away. He didn't move, continuing to hold her hips and pin her to the table. "You need to leave," Ken started shouting. "Fuck you, Ken, and you too, Becky," I replied. Becky began to push him away furiously, but Ken didn't let her go. "Damn it, Ken," Becky screamed. "Get away from me." Ken didn't move, still staring at me. I was actually glad that Ken didn't back down. I didn't want to see what he was doing to please her. Maybe I should have walked over and tried to punch him, but I couldn't think clearly at the time. I still couldn't believe what I saw. My wife, whom I considered conservative, was happy to have sex to get out of there as quickly as possible. I turned and closed the door behind me. "Jim, wait," Becky screamed. But I wasn't going to wait. In fact, the only thing I wanted was to get away from her and this place as quickly as possible. The pass fell out of my hand, and I ran. I rushed out of the office to my truck. I didn't know where I was going, but I ran as fast as I could. Jumping into the cab, I started the engine and drove out of the parking lot as fast as I could. I glanced in the rearview mirror, but didn't see Becky at the entrance. Apparently Ken wasn't done, so maybe they were still going at it. I knew Becky was panicking when I left, so I expected her to run after me. But maybe not. Ken clearly didn't want to stop, judging by the way he acted when I burst in. I had only been driving for a couple of minutes when I realized that I was heading towards our house. My head was a mess and tears were streaming down my face. And then it dawned on me. My subconscious mind had already begun to formulate a plan. I was going to go home, quickly pack my things, and find a place to stay for the night. The last thing I wanted was to be anywhere near Becky. I felt a vibration in my pocket and pulled out my phone. It was from Becky. I decided to answer. "What do you want?" I asked. "Oh God, Jim, I'm sorry you saw that," she said. I only said 3 words before passing out. "Fuck you, Becky." I turned off the phone and threw it on the seat next to me. As I drove, I started making a mental list of what I would need in the coming days. When I arrived at the house, I hurried to the kitchen and grabbed several garbage bags. In the bathroom, I threw all my toiletries into the first bag. I grabbed a pair of shoes from the closet and then started throwing shirts and pants into it. The bag was almost full, so I tied it up and headed to the dresser. I started with the top drawer and went through everything: socks, underwear, t-shirts, shorts, even a swimsuit from the bottom drawer. On top of the chest of drawers, I took a couple of watches and my cologne. All this quickly went into the package. I looked around to see what else might be needed. He went to the bedside table and opened the drawer. There was my .38 Smith & Wesson. I didn't think I'd need it, but in a hurry, I threw it into the bag. I looked around the room again, but didn't find anything else I needed, so I tied up a second bag. I had to hurry to leave before Becky got back. I assumed she was rushing home as fast as she could. I took both bags to the front door and went into the office to get my laptop. I stuffed it into my backpack along with my phone charger and headed for the door. Just as I was picking up the bags, the door swung open and Becky stood in front of me. She stood 10 feet away from me. It was clear that she had put on her clothes hastily. Her red hair was tousled. We both froze. I noticed that she was crying. "Jim, I'm sorry you saw that. Why did you come to my office without calling?" "Fuck you, Becky," I repeated, picking up both bags and heading towards the exit. "Wait, Jim. Please let me talk to you." She stepped forward, blocking the path to the door. "Get out of my way, Becky. I've never hit a woman, but I swear if you come close, I'll knock the wind out of you. So, if you don't want to wake up on the floor, get out of the way," I growled. She saw the fire in my eyes. Fury was boiling in my head. I was sure I would have hit her if she had come closer. Without even thinking, Becky saw it in my gaze and stepped aside. I grabbed the bags and hurried to my pickup. He threw them on the passenger seat, walked around the car, but then stopped. Crap. I forgot one thing. I had to go back. Becky was still standing in the living room, crying when I ran back in. My return took her by surprise, but I was already on my way. "Jim, please just stop and talk to me." I ignored her and headed through the kitchen to the back door. Opening it, I began to peer into our backyard. My eyes tried to adjust to the darkness. I looked left and right. "Max, come here, boy!" I shouted. I felt something touch my leg. My black Labrador was already standing at my feet, looking at me as if I had gone crazy. I looked down. Max wagged his tail, showing that he still loved me. "Come on, buddy," I said, quickly heading back into the house. Max followed me. "Let's get out of here and away from this cheating bitch," I said, walking through the living room. I didn't even slow down, but I looked at Becky. The rage still simmered inside me. Before, I couldn't believe that there could be so much anger and hatred in my mind, but they filled every corner of my brain. I was in a state I had never experienced before. I literally wanted to grab her by the throat and strangle her. "Oh God, Jim, I'm so sorry. Please stay, talk to me, I'll explain everything." Becky was already sobbing uncontrollably. I walked out the door with Max and slammed it behind me with a loud bang. As I turned to my truck, I heard Becky open the door and yell, "Jim, please don't go. I beg you." I opened the passenger door to let Max in. I threw the bags behind the seat. Max jumped inside. Closing the door, I noticed my neighbors. Stan and Bridget stood on the brightly lit porch and looked at us. Apparently, we put on quite a show. I didn't wave my hand, I just walked around the car and jumped behind the wheel. I realized that I was making a scene, but as I drove away, I sharply pressed the gas and the tires squealed. Max and I sped away. I drove 2 blocks before I realized I had no idea where I was going. I stopped on a quiet, dark residential street to think, looking at the floor of my pickup truck. No thoughts came, only tears. The anger that filled my mind was replaced by pain and sadness. I couldn't believe what had happened in the last hour. It was not at all like a man, but the tears flowed freely. I haven't cried like this since I was a little boy. I didn't know I was capable of crying like that, but it turned out that I could. I covered my face with my hands, tears soaked through them. I couldn't stop. I kept saying, "Damn it," again and again. Suddenly, I felt the side of my face become wet with saliva. Max began licking the parts of my face that were not covered with his hands. I realized that this must have frightened my devoted friend. My crying subsided. I needed to pull myself together. I looked at Max, whose face was making a long, sad expression. He realized that something terrible had happened. "Damn it, what do we do now, Max?" I said, holding back tears with difficulty. He looked at me as if he was wondering the same question himself. "We'll find a place to stay and figure it out in the morning," I told him. "But first, we'll stop at the liquor store. I think I'll need some medicine to help me sleep tonight." I woke up the next morning with a terrible hangover. My head was pounding. I looked at the bottle on the nightstand. There was about an inch of vodka left in the bottle. "God, you shouldn't have done this to yourself," I said out loud. Memories of the previous evening began to return, but the hangover was clouding everything. I felt completely disoriented. I didn't even know what time it was, but then I remembered Max. He stood at the edge of the bed, wagging his tail. I glanced at the desk clock. It was 9:30 am. "Damn, sorry, Max." I jumped to my feet. I should have taken the poor guy outside, but I had to slow down when I almost fell. My foggy brain had not yet fully interacted with my body. Then I realized that I didn't have his leash. It was probably the first of many things I would need in the coming days, but in my haste I left it at home. I took the belt out of my pants and put them on. I took one of the trash bags from the small bin near the table in the room to use when Max was done with his business. Using the belt as a leash, I led Max out onto the grass next to the hotel. My eyes had difficulty adjusting to the bright daylight, which caused unbearable pain in my head. I realized that I needed to call work. I reached into my pocket, but the phone was not there. We had to find him and call him as soon as possible. Max finished his business. "Okay, Max, here's the plan. First, I'll find some painkillers, then I'll call work and say I'm sick today, and then we'll get to eating." My stomach was churning, and I hoped that food would calm it down. I found the phone in my truck and turned it on. It started vibrating again and again. Becky tried to call me 8 times, and I think she sent about 10 text messages. I didn't want to deal with this crap, so I ignored everything. I called work and spoke to my boss, telling him that I had a family emergency and would not be able to come in today. I may even need to take a few days off next week. He realized that I was serious and was understanding. Carl has 5 children and always told his employees that family comes first. "Take all the time you need, Jim." It was clear from his tone that Carl was speaking sincerely. This gave me confidence that at least my work was in order. We sat in the McDonald's parking lot and ate our sandwiches. I had the sausage McMuffin and Max had the egg McMuffin. I sat and thought about what I saw last night. Sadness enveloped me. I didn't cry, I was just incredibly depressed. It felt like my world was collapsing around me. Now I knew what people meant when they said there was a dark cloud hanging over you. The world I now live in was completely different from my world just yesterday morning. I started thinking about my next steps. Did I want to talk to Becky? I knew that sooner or later I would have to, but I couldn't do it yet. And what could she tell me? I saw everything I needed to see to understand what it meant to her and to me. I don't want to be anywhere near that thing right now, I told Max. At some point, I'll probably want to know why she cheated, especially with that bastard boss. What was her plan? Make me a cuckold while she enjoyed his big size? Leave for him because he makes more money? He didn't seem like her type, but I guess I didn't know Becky well. However, as I thought about the possible reasons, I also realized that they really didn't matter. I knew my marriage was over. I felt like I was living in a nightmare. I wish it wasn't true, but I knew it was. I saw it with my own eyes. It felt like I couldn't or shouldn't continue. What was all this for? It seemed like nothing in my life mattered anymore. I started crying again. Poor Max just looked at me with his sad eyes. I scratched him behind the ears. Don't worry, man, we can handle it. We'll get through all of this somehow. God, I love this woman with all my heart. Becky and I met in college through mutual friends. We were both at Ernie's house to watch the Chiefs game that Sunday afternoon. Ernie and Carol were already engaged and seemed like a nice couple. Ernie was an engineering graduate student who once helped me with calculus when I needed it. Becky knew Carol from some subject they shared. That day, about a dozen people gathered at Ernie's house for the big playoff game. Becky was fully dressed in Chiefs merchandise. Her red hair and fair skin seemed made for the team's gold and red colors. She even had the Chiefs logo painted on her cheek. I noticed her when I entered the kitchen with the beer I bought. She helped Carol prepare snacks, and they animatedly discussed how the Chiefs would play against the Ravens. A girl who knows football, I thought. My girlfriend. Oh, hi, Jim. Glad you came. Are you ready? We're going to tear the Ravens apart, Carol said. Well, I'm not as confident as you, but yeah, it'll be fun. Carol noticed me glancing at Becky. Jim, this is Becky, my friend. She's on a business communications course with me. Nice to meet you, Becky, I said, shaking her hand. So you're a Chiefs fan, I take it? I grinned and winked at her. We both laughed. I started putting beer into the large cooler on the floor while I watched Becky out of the corner of my eye. She was a beautiful girl, about 5 feet 4 inches tall, with brown red hair and brown eyes that sparkled when she smiled at me. She had a slender figure with nice curves, but not too large breasts. Her movements around the kitchen were energetic, and it was noticeable that she was without a bra. Her breasts bounced slightly. I was fascinated, but I thought that such a girl probably had a boyfriend or even 2 or 3. Becky looked at me. I had already finished laying out the beer and was just standing there, trying to figure out how to continue the conversation. I'm sure Becky noticed I was looking at her. She looked at me again and, it seemed, began to evaluate me herself. Where is your Chiefs paraphernalia? Are you by any chance a Ravens fan? She asked, looking at me intently, as if I were a Ravens fan, I would be immediately kicked out of the house. No way. I grew up here, Chiefs forever, I answered. I knew I scored a couple of points with this. Becky grabbed the snacks and took them into the living room. Carol, what about, she? I know what you want to ask, Carol said with a big smile. No, she doesn't have a boyfriend. But be careful, she recently broke up with a guy she dated for a long time. That was about 2 months ago. I made sure to sit next to Becky during the game and found out she was from North Kansas City. She was one of 3 children, and her father worked at a car factory. Luckily, we won the game and Becky was in high spirits during the post-match celebrations. I took advantage of this and invited her to dinner the following Saturday. She smiled and said she would like it. Becky and I started dating and got along great. We were on the same page when it came to plans for our lives, although I couldn't express mine as clearly as Becky could. I want to devote several years to my career, save money, and eventually start a family, 2 children, maybe 3. When the kids go to school, I can go back to work, Becky told me, looking straight into my eyes, trying to gauge my reaction. I knew that if she noticed even a hint of negativity, it would mean the end of our relationship. Fortunately, her plans coincided with mine. I felt a little out of place around Becky. She was stunningly beautiful, and I considered myself average. I always lived with the feeling that I was invisible to others, well, who would pay attention to me. But now, walking with Becky, I noticed that everyone was looking at us. Or rather at her, but people became friendlier to me, especially women. As if standing next to Becky made me more attractive. Becky and I became inseparable. We enjoyed spending time together, and Becky would take me everywhere with her on the weekends. If we weren't at an art festival or a high school football game on Friday night, we were grocery shopping or picking up clothes from the dry cleaner. On Saturday mornings, she would pull out her list, and we would hit the road. She always had a plan. This time I had a plan. I was going to marry this girl. I waited 10 months to propose to her. I didn't want to seem too hasty and scare her off. As my dad used to say, you can swing big, but it's important to wait for the right ball. To my surprise, and of course relief, she said yes. This happened in the summer, about a year and a half after we met. The wedding was large, not too luxurious, but with many guests, as we both had many relatives in the area. We both worked and spent the next year in the Kansas City area. Since we both grew up here, we discussed trying something new. We were not satisfied with our positions or the companies where we worked. We began to look for more interesting positions where we could express ourselves and grow. We weren't afraid of difficulties, so we started looking around. This brought us to Oklahoma City. I found a job that required engineering skills and had the potential for growth. I went there for an interview. While researching the company before the interview, I realized that all the managers were engineers. They had a lot of technical people, but they needed engineers to make decisions. Becky and I talked it over and decided it was time to leave Kansas City. Oklahoma City was big enough to require advertising people, so we were confident that Becky would find work quickly. I accepted the offer. We found a cozy condominium in the city center, and, having settled in, Becky began looking for work in advertising with incredible enthusiasm. While I was settling into my new job, she spent hours every day sending out resumes, researching local companies, and trying to make contacts in the local advertising community. I was confident that her efforts would quickly pay off, but my confidence alone was not enough to overcome the stagnation of the local economy. Oil prices were low, and the oil industry was the main driver of the local economy. After a couple of months, Becky had not received a single response and began to become depressed. One evening, I tried to encourage her and told her that she needed to think outside the box. I was hoping she would find a job that required advertising talent, but it didn't have to be an advertising firm. I also hoped to cheer her up, because when Becky was sad, her sexual desire waned and our sex life became very rare. Thinking outside the box, Becky said. I still remember this conversation. I saw how her brain, which was always full of ideas, began to work, and she perked up a little. What I didn't know at the time was how outside the box Becky was going to think and how it would later change our lives. Becky was in a better mood after this conversation, and when I came home one evening a couple of weeks later, she was literally beaming with joy. She had prepared a sumptuous dinner and was flitting around the kitchen when I entered. There was her favorite bottle of wine on the counter. Chardonnay on a weekday, what's the reason? I have an interview with one of the advertising firms downtown, Becky said with a big smile on her face. Is this Simon and Simpson? I asked. I knew that this was the largest company and that she would really like to work there. No, but it's their competitor, Hartford Associates. The company has a great reputation, Becky smiled, and I was happy for her, even if she didn't get the job. I started opening a bottle of wine. Well, I'm sure you'll just blow them away. With your talent and energy, soon the whole city will know your name. I handed Becky a full glass of wine. I had little doubt that her good mood would carry over into our bedroom. Let me raise a toast. For Becky Williams, her work will soon be known throughout the city, and her client sales will skyrocket thanks to Hartford Associates. We both smiled and took large sips of wine. I was confident that Becky would do well in the interview. I was also sure that thanks to the wine she drank, I was in for a great night. Now that's what I call a win-win. Becky did really well in her interview and was offered a significant position on a team developing campaigns for mid-tier clients. The salary was significantly higher than what she received in Kansas City. She said the job would not be easy, but her position offered greater visibility, and she was told a promotion was possible if her campaigns were successful. Over the next few months, we both focused on achieving success at work. We both worked long hours, but were excited by the prospects. We talked about starting a family. It was something we both wanted, but agreed we needed to get a better foothold first. We were both making more money than we had in Kansas City, and as planned, we started saving for a down payment on a house. Overall, everything went according to plan. About 4 months after Becky got the job, she came home upset. She was somewhat absent-minded, even a little depressed. It was a complete change in her character. "Becky, what happened? Did something happen?" She looked at me as if she had seen a ghost. "It's nothing, Jim. Just things to do at work." "Becky, don't lie to me. I see that something is wrong. What's happening?" Becky looked at me with an almost sad expression, but didn't say anything. It seemed that she was about to cry. I just looked at her, waiting for an answer. She froze for a moment and then said, "Jim, I really—" She hesitated. I saw that she was thinking. "They are now reorganizing at work and laying off people. I'm afraid I might be one of them." I saw a tear roll down her cheek. "Oh, Becky, you're just thinking about it too much. I'm sure they've realized how valuable you are a long time ago and aren't even considering firing you." "I hope you're right, Jim. I love this job. What will we do if I get fired? How can we save for a house?" Becky's mood remained depressed for a couple of weeks. I saw that she was distracted. I tried to cheer her up almost every evening. On the second Saturday, I took her to dinner at a nice restaurant. "I'm sure you have nothing to worry about, dear." "Oh, Jim, if I lose this job, I don't know what to do. This will set us back a lot. We save so well. I was hoping that next summer we could start looking for a house. If I get fired, this will all fall through." "Honey, if this happens, we can handle it. It might slow us down, but it won't hold us back forever. We'll figure it out." Becky seemed unimpressed by my attempts to calm her down. "Becky, go and take control of the situation. Let them know that they can rely on you. Remind them how talented you are and how brilliantly you did the Robinson campaign. It was your ideas that made it successful. You always do your best." I talked about its successful slogan, which helped sell many cars for Robinson. "Yes, Jim, I think you're right. I'll talk to Ken on Monday." Becky talked to her boss and let him know she could be relied upon. This decision changed our lives. Becky wasn't fired. Moreover, she received a promotion. However, the strangest thing was that her mood did not improve. I thought she would be over the moon about her new responsibilities. With promotions, she sometimes worked longer. She had to attend planning meetings on Thursday evenings. But these extra hours weren't that many and didn't seem to affect her mood. "Becky, how is work going since the promotion? With job security and the extra money we're saving, I thought you'd be just happy. Sorry you have to work longer." I saw the tense expression on her face. It was similar to what I saw when she was afraid of losing her job. "It's not about the extra hours, Jim, it's about—" She stopped, with the same tense expression. I was waiting for what she would say. But she suddenly recovered and smiled. "I thought maybe we should start our family earlier. Do you agree, Jim?" "Of course, dear, whenever you want." Only now, looking back, do I realize that I should have noticed the signs. It never occurred to me that Becky could cheat. She was a strategist with a mission. I thought this mission was to create our family, but it seems her real goal was to make me a cuckold. And then what? Leave me for someone who makes more money, like her boss. He wasn't married, so maybe they were planning to run away together. Maybe her recent mood swings were related to planning our divorce. Now I knew I needed answers. but I was so angry that I wasn't going to talk to her anytime soon. All I could think about was that I would divorce this prostitute. She clearly didn't love me as much as I thought she did. After breakfast, Max and I returned to our hotel room. I opened my laptop and started calling lawyers. After making several calls, I found someone who could meet me that day. It was a small, nondescript office in a professional building a few miles away. Second floor, fifth door on the right. On the door was written, Robert Matheson, lawyer. I walked in and he didn't have a secretary, so I walked past the empty desk and looked into the office. A man was sitting at the table and working on some documents. Hello, I'm Jim. Great, come in and sit down. Thank you for receiving me so quickly. My name is Robert Matheson, he introduced himself. We shook hands and I sat down in a chair that looked like it was bought back in the 80s. You can call me Bob. Can my dog come in? I didn't want to leave it at the hotel, but I can't leave it in a hot car. Certainly. What's his name? Max, my faithful companion. Probably my only reliable companion right now. It's clear. So is this the reason you're here? Is your wife no longer trustworthy? You mentioned that you are considering divorce. You can say so. Yesterday I found her with her boss. When you say caught, do you mean that you became a witness? Yes, about 10 feet away from them. There can be no doubt about it. It's clear. I'm sorry to hear that. Yes, no one should find out this way. Did this happen at your home? No, in her office. I wanted to surprise her tonight. Looks like a surprise was in store for me. Fine. First, tell us what exactly you saw, and then about your relationship with your wife. After that, we will discuss the legal side. I started to like Bob. He seemed to be a man who went straight to the point. I told Bob exactly what I saw and how unusual it was for her. At times, I found it difficult to contain myself as I poured out this story. Max had been lying a few feet away from me, but now he came and settled at my feet, looking up at me. I scratched him behind the ear. Everything will be fine, buddy. Were there any signs before you discovered it? Not really. Maybe. I hesitated. I thought we had a great relationship, but it seems I was wrong. Jim, perhaps there is something more behind this than you saw. Maybe her boss was harassing her. Bob, she was naked, and I heard her begging him to have sex with him. Again. That's enough for me. Bob just shook his head. He explained the divorce laws in our state, said that in Oklahoma I can file for divorce on the grounds of infidelity, but that is usually only used to gain an advantage in child custody matters. This is unlikely to improve your chances of getting a better settlement. I wasn't sure exactly how I wanted to present it. At the end of the conversation, he said that if I decided to apply, he would be happy to start the process. I want to serve as soon as possible, Bob. Can you start immediately? Jim, you said you only found her yesterday. Why don't you give yourself a few days before I start billing you for the watch? The first consultation is free. Have you spoken to her since you found her? No. I don't think she can say anything that will matter after what I saw last night. Well, my free advice is to sit down and talk to her. Sometimes these things can be worked out, even in the craziest situations. You never know. You should at least listen to her version of events. This can help us plan a strategy if you decide to file. I don't know, Bob. It will be difficult. What can she say to get the image of her bent over that table out of my head? Well, let yourself cool down a little, and then, as I advise, try it. And if you decide to move forward, here's a list of information we'll need to get started. It also contains a list of things to do if you are going to separate from her financially. We will also file for legal separation to protect you financially. I looked at the papers. Okay, Bob, I'll give myself a few days and see how things go. Bob stood up, extending his hand to me. And be careful. If you have anger issues, don't give her any reason to use it against us in court. You mean we shouldn't choke her? I was thinking about this last night. I smiled to let Bob know it was a joke. At least I thought it was a joke. After what I felt, I wasn't sure. Bob shook my hand again. Call me in a few days and tell me how things are going, he said. "Let's go, Max." I headed towards the door. He jumped up and we left. "Let's go have dinner at Burger King." Becky. "Oh my God." Jim caught Ken and me having sex in his office and then just ran out. When I caught up with him at home, he was so angry that I was afraid that he might kill me. I've never seen Jim so angry. Now he probably hates me for what he saw. It wasn't what he thought, but it was most likely the end of our marriage. The second I saw Jim in the doorway, my world collapsed. I couldn't breathe. Panic flooded my mind as I looked into his eyes. I wanted to erase this scene. This simply couldn't happen. I was bent over Ken's desk, and he was having sex with me, thrusting hard, both of us naked. Ken had this habit of having me naked in his office. I admit it turned me on more too. We were in the midst of it when suddenly I heard Jim's voice at the door. I'm not even sure what he said. Ken stopped moving and pressed my body to the table. I felt him tense. I wanted to move. I started squirming, trying to push Ken away. "How the hell did you get here? You need to leave." I could hear the anger in Ken's voice. What was Ken thinking? That I would let him continue to have sex with me even after Jim came in. "Get your damn hands off me," I screamed. I pushed back, trying to free myself from Ken. I heard the door close. I looked and saw that Jim had left. "Oh God." I screamed again, twisting and finally freeing myself from Ken. How did this impotent guy get here? Ken seemed more angry that Jim was in the office after closing than that my world was falling apart. He didn't seem to care. I turned around and slapped Ken in the face as hard as I could. He recoiled slightly. "What the hell, Ken? You didn't let me get up, and then you got even more angry and kicked Jim out. You're such an arrogant bastard. He had nothing to do in the office after the end of the working day. So Jim caught you having sex with his wife, and you're mad at him. You're a real scumbag. Do you understand that?" I hurriedly pulled on my panties and skirt. "But what about?" Ken lowered his gaze, and I noticed that he was still excited. My world was crumbling before my eyes, and this guy was still ready for sex and clearly wanted to continue. I quickly got dressed and ran out of the office. Jim was no longer there. I ran out into the parking lot and saw the red lights of his truck in the distance. I stood there, tears streaming down my face, until those lights disappeared from sight. I felt like I was watching my marriage disappear into the night. I returned to my desk and grabbed my phone. I needed to talk to Jim and somehow explain everything. I clicked on the first button in the favorites list. I doubted Jim would want to talk to me, but I had to try. He answered after the first ring, but the conversation was short. "Fuck you, Becky," he said and hung up. I heard Ken's voice. He stood naked in the doorway of his office. "You should give it time to cool down. Why don't you come back and we can finish what we started?" Did Ken really think that the sight of his naked body would make me want to again? "Fuck you, Ken. Jim caught us, and you're still thinking only about your own pleasure. You're a real bastard. You know that? You're lucky he didn't come in and kick your ass. Not in this life. This cuckold should still be grateful that he didn't do something stupid by trying to threaten me. Otherwise, he would have caught his wife with someone else and gotten hit in the face on the same night." I didn't have time to listen to his boastful nonsense. I grabbed my bag and headed towards the exit. Home was the only place I could find Jim, and I needed to get there as quickly as possible. When I got home, I saw Jim's truck parked across 2 spaces in the driveway. I quickly parked my car in front of the house, breaking the rules, and jumped out without even thinking. I ran out of the car and rushed into the house. I had no idea what I would say, but I needed to talk to him. I had to try to calm him down and explain everything. I opened the door and saw Jim standing with 2 garbage bags in his hands. We just stood and looked at each other. I saw the fire in Jim's eyes. It seemed like he was ready to kill me. I also noticed that he was crying. I've never seen Jim cry before. It broke my heart, and I burst into tears. Everything came together in an instant, and within a minute Jim had taken our dog Max and was speeding away in his truck. My legs gave way. I fell to my knees in the hallway, leaving the door open, and burst into tears. My legs could no longer support me, and I curled up on the floor. The sobbing sound came from the very depths of my stomach. I don't know how long I lay there like that, but even when the tears dried up, I didn't move. I didn't want to move. What should I do now? Where should I go? The man I loved so much, my world, now hated me. Becky, are you okay? I heard a voice above me. It was my neighbor Kelly from the house across the street. Now he's gone and not answering calls. I try to call him every 15 minutes, hoping he will pick up. I sent him messages begging him to talk to me. I need him to know that things are not as they seem. I definitely don't like Ken. Ken is a creep who blackmailed me into sleeping with him. I think it's my fault, but I never planned for this. It all started when I was desperately trying to find a job. Jim and I moved to Oklahoma City about 3 months ago. We moved there for his new job. Jim was the lead engineer for a fastener company. Unlike his previous job, Jim loved this place and came home in the evenings, talking enthusiastically about his projects. We moved to Oklahoma City to advance our careers and move closer to our dream of starting a family. The only problem was that I couldn't find a job. In fact, I had a hard time even getting an interview, and only with non-advertising companies that were looking for marketers. I didn't want to do marketing. I wanted to work in advertising. Rebecca, you definitely have an impressive resume, Ken said. He was an attractive man of about 50, tall, with black hair, half gray. He looked in good shape, and I noticed his expensive suit. I always try to be observant in interviews, and it was obvious that Ken dressed and acted to impress. Please call me Becky. Well, Becky, I'm not sure this position will interest you. I'm afraid she won't give you the same responsibilities that you had in your previous position. I smiled. Well, Mr. Smythe, your company has a good reputation. I'm definitely interested in learning more. Please call me Ken. He was smiling widely now. We talked for about an hour, and I realized that he was interested. I told him that I strive for success and always try to develop unique campaigns. I noticed his smile at these words. 20 minutes before the end of the interview, he asked a question about my personal life. We are like a family here, and I would like to know more about you. Tell us a little about yourself. I told her that I grew up in Kansas City, was married for almost 2 years, and that my husband and I don't have children yet. When he elaborated, I told him a little about my childhood in Kansas City and Jim's work. Then he said something that I should have picked up on back then. Well, you are definitely a beautiful woman, and I love your energy. I liked what you said about striving for success. Ken stood up, and I knew the interview was over. I also stood up and extended my hand to him. His hand was large, he shook mine firmly, and we said goodbye. He just said he likes me. Then it seemed to me that he was talking exclusively about professional sympathy. I smiled again and became more confident that they would offer me a job. I knew that I could handle it and that I had a chance to get this position. Hartford Associates called me about a week later and invited me for a second interview. That Wednesday, I was back in Ken's office. It turned out that this was not a second interview, but a meeting at which he offered me a job. After our brief reintroduction, Ken began the conversation. Becky, thanks for coming. Ken shook my hand again, and I sat down across from his large desk. I really enjoyed our interview last week. I think you are exactly the person we were looking for. You have an impressive resume, but I would like to offer you a position that I hope you will consider. We would like to offer you the position of assistant producer. I hope you will take this proposal seriously. You will lead a small team working on campaigns for our SMB clients. I was previously a member of a design team in Kansas City, but never held a leadership position. I tried not to show too much enthusiasm. I understood that this was my opportunity. This job was exactly what I needed to jumpstart my career. Mr. Smythe, I am ready to take on this position and show what I can do. Working for a company like Hartford is an exciting prospect. Ken was pleased, and we agreed on payment terms. They turned out even better than I expected. That evening, I cooked a holiday dinner for myself and Jim. I had so much energy from thinking about my new job that I couldn't sit still. Jim walked home, smelled the food, looked at the table set and the bottle of wine, and realized that something special had happened. Becky, what does this all mean? I take it everything went well at Hartford? I practically jumped into Jim's arms. I hugged him and spun around. Yes, Jim, I got it. And this is in an assistant producer position, so I will be responsible for the small and medium business. I will make decisions and develop campaigns. All this made me feel important, and the salary is higher than I expected. We can save for a house, buy you a new truck, and— Wait, calm down, girl, Jim smiled. You better establish yourself there first before we make big decisions. Jim, this is exactly what we wanted. I couldn't stop smiling. I'll be able to build a career for a couple of years, and then we'll start our family. My plans kept coming out without stopping. I was in seventh heaven, looking forward to the future. Kyle is my brother. He is a couple of years younger than me and is considered more wild. Although he was not truly wild, he simply decided not to go to college. Kyle said he enjoyed working outdoors on construction sites, which certainly kept him in great shape. He had what girls call a perfect body, and Kyle skillfully used his appearance. He always had cute girlfriends who seemed crazy about him. I could understand it, he was polite and respectful. Combined with his looks and work ethic, girls were literally drawn to him. But Kyle wasn't looking for a serious relationship, so he rarely stayed with someone for long. This did not stop the girls who tried to conquer him, sometimes even more than once. Max and I stopped only once to get gas and take a break. We stopped at Burger King by car. Max wagged his tail as we approached the window. When a pretty young girl looked out, Max climbed onto my lap and stuck his head out of the window in her direction, as if meeting an old friend. The girl smiled and I noticed her name tag, Kayla. I watched Max's tail slapping the seat as he tried to squeeze his way toward Kayla. I laughed at his enthusiasm. Yeah, she's cute, I said quietly to Max. Kayla, this is Max. Max, Kayla, I introduced them, which made the girl laugh. She handed Max a dog biscuit, which he immediately took. Okay, Max, that's enough. I carefully pushed it back into place. 1 Whopper with Diet Coke, 6 chicken nuggets, and water. Is everything right? Kayla asked politely with a smile. I paid and we parked to eat. Max seemed delighted with his nuggets. After a short walk through the grass, we were on our way again. We arrived home around 7 in the evening. Max and I got out of the car, leaving the bags of clothes in the truck. I knew Mom and Dad would ask why Becky wasn't with me, and I already had a little lie prepared. When we entered, I saw my mother, Kyle, and an unfamiliar girl. I assumed it was Kyle's new girlfriend. They sat at the bar between the kitchen and dining room. Dad was sitting at the large table in the dining room and reading the newspaper. Mom jumped up to hug me and Kyle screamed Max's name and crouched down to hug the dog. Hugging my mother, I looked at the unfamiliar girl. Kyle was still petting Max, and Mom introduced Tracy to me as Kyle's girlfriend. Nice to meet you, Tracy, I said, giving her a small hug. I was thirsty and said to my mom, is there any Diet Coke in the refrigerator? I'm dying of thirst. Of course there is, Jim. I bought it in advance because I knew you were coming. And if she weren't there, oh, horror. I looked into the refrigerator, took out a jar, and opened it. Glancing at my mother, I noticed her gaze full of questions. Jim, where is Becky? You said she would go with you. I didn't say she would come, Mom. She decided to stay home. Jim, you said, will come later. Yes, we have arrived, Max and I. Mom looked at me with suspicion. She knew that something was wrong, and I knew that there was very little chance of fooling my mother. The last thing I wanted was to burden her with my current problems. I just wanted to feel stability, to be with my family, with people who love me. I wasn't going to tell them about Becky cheating on me. Is Becky still in Oklahoma City? Mom was clearly confused. Becky also had family in Kansas City, and she always came with me. In fact, she was usually the one who planned everything and informed both families, and we always went to a barbecue restaurant or steakhouse together. No, it was somehow spontaneous for me. Becky has work to do this weekend, so I decided to come over. I hoped that my mother would believe my trick, but I knew that it was almost impossible to deceive her. I looked at my brother. Kyle, I need to buy Max some proper dog food. Do you want to go to the store with me? If I run away, I won't have to answer my mom's questions. After Kyle and I found Max's food at a local store, we stood in line at the checkout. Well, go ahead and lay it out, said Kyle. What's happened? Did you and Becky have a fight? Damn, I thought. If I can't hide this from Kyle, then Mom's alarm bells are already ringing. Yes, we had a fight. Nothing serious, I lied. I still wasn't going to talk about cheating on Becky. We paid and walked out to my pickup truck, then got inside. Bullshit, Jim. You took the plunge and came here spontaneously. This means something serious happened. Did you do something stupid? Becky kicked you out? Did you cheat on her? What are you talking about, Kyle? Where did you even get this from? Do you think I cheated on Becky? I know what we guys are like. We see a beautiful girl, and sometimes it makes us do stupid things. And Jim, you have things in garbage bags in the back seat. You left there in a hurry. Kyle pointed to the back seat of my pickup. Now I was starting to get angry. No fucking way, Kyle. I didn't cheat on Becky. It wasn't me who cheated on her. Kyle looked at me with a blank expression. Then his face suddenly changed into a look of shock. Oh my God, Jim. You caught Becky with someone else, right? Kyle's eyes studied my face. I wanted to deny it, but I couldn't say a word. There was a huge lump in my throat. I felt sadness written all over my face as I looked at Kyle. Without another word, I turned around and started the pickup. As I was backing out, Kyle said, "Shooters, Jim. Let's go to Shooters. Let's have a beer and talk. We can't go home yet." "What about Tracy?" I asked. "Are you going to leave her with Mom and Dad?" "She loves them, and they love her. Tracy is actually very nice. Besides, she thinks that if I become friends with my mother, I will start to take our relationship more seriously, so everything is fine." I didn't feel like talking at all, but Kyle started asking me questions anyway as we drove to Shooters. It was a local sports bar near my parents' house. We sat down at a table and a cute girl in short shorts and a crop top approached us. She recognized Kyle and smiled widely. "Look who it brought to us," she said. "I haven't seen you for 100 years. Probably the last time you left me for that blonde. Nita, be a good girl. That blonde was your best friend. If I'm not mistaken, she still has it." Yes, we made up. We decided that our friendship is more important than some guy who doesn't understand anything about a serious relationship. Her words sounded harsh, but it was clear that Nita was not particularly angry. "Admitted guilt," Kyle said with a smile. "And who is your next victim?" Nita was smiling now. "I won't tell. You'll warn her, but then what should I do?" They both laughed. "Of course, I would warn you. We girls need to stick together, and you need to be warned about broken hearts. So what should I bring you?" "Two Dos Equis, please." I told Kyle everything, but at first he didn't believe me. "Can't be. I can't even imagine that Becky is capable of this." Kyle was shocked. "I mean, what the hell? Does he have money? Do you think she plans to leave you for him and his wealth?" "Don't know. He's so much older than her, and I just can't imagine it. I just quickly got out of there. Max and I spent the night at the hotel. Becky tries to call and text me every hour or so, but I've turned it off." I patted my pocket, realizing that I hadn't felt a vibration in a long time. There was no phone in my pocket. Crap. I realized that I had left it on the table at home. "Well, to hell with it, Jim. I don't know what could have made her do this, but there are still plenty of fish in the sea. Hell, Tracy has an older sister who's damn pretty and likes more conservative guys like you. Plus, I've heard that she usually gives in on the first or second date. I can arrange it." "Kyle, this is crazy. I'm still married, and I'm not even thinking in that direction." "Well, I figured you'd be leaving her soon, so when you feel like it's time to get back in the saddle, Old Kyle is right there. I know it just happened, but fuck it, Jim. Life is too short to stay with a cheater. I'm telling you, move on, quickly. I felt like I had to stand up for Becky. My brother had just called my wife a bitch, but I probably felt the same way, and at that moment, more than anything, I wanted to get rid of her as quickly as possible. You're right, Kyle. I'll move on soon. To hell with it. We both took big gulps of beer. She's just a big mistake that will soon be in the rearview mirror. When we returned home, Mom was setting the table. I looked at the counter where I left my phone and noticed that someone had put it on charge. Dinner went smoothly. Mom is a great cook. She made beef stew and homemade buns. It was delicious. Dad and I were talking about Royals baseball and discussing our chances for the upcoming season. He was always more pessimistic than me. I think it can be called more realistic. I used to think that every player would exceed expectations, and if everyone was at their best, we would have a great team. Dad pointed out the likelihood of players doing this or that, and the analysis showed that the season would be less than stellar. Unfortunately, Dad was almost always right. Mom was quiet at dinner and mostly talked to Tracy. She glanced at me from time to time, trying to catch my emotions. Dad may not have noticed that there was anything wrong with me, but Mom didn't. She knew that something was wrong, but did not want to start a conversation on this topic in the company. Kyle must have been right. Tracy really tried to please her mom. Perhaps she was trying too hard, but she seemed like a very sweet, beautiful girl. Tall, slender, with long, straight brown hair and small breasts. She looked like a model. While talking to her mom, she clearly showed interest in Kyle. I heard her ask my mother what he was like as a child. She often touched Kyle's arm. It was clear that she was in love. I didn't understand how Kyle always did it. He's always attracted to cute, charming girls, but he's never taken them seriously. I wondered what would make him finally settle down. After dinner, Kyle seemed to hurry away, saying he had to take Tracy home. It was unusual for a Saturday night, but it seemed like they were in a hurry. I assumed that he also realized that my mother had noticed my condition and decided not to interfere. After Kyle and Tracy left, I stayed to help Mom clean the kitchen. Dad disappeared into the living room, turned on the Royals game, and sat down in his chair. Mom was unusually quiet while we cleaned the kitchen, but that didn't last long. In our family, my mother was always the one who listened, and I felt that a conversation was just around the corner. When the kitchen was almost clean, Mom turned to me. I saw sadness and concern in her eyes. "Come on, Jim." Mom pushed the chair away from the table. "Sit down and you can tell me what's going on." "Nothing's happening, Mom," I said defensively, sitting down. "Why are you so?" Mom raised her hand, interrupting me. "Jim, when you went to get food for Max, you left your phone on the counter. It vibrated every 15 minutes like a clock. I looked to see who was trying to contact you, and it turned out to be Becky. I thought it might be something urgent, so I answered. At first, she was confused. When she heard my voice, I told her that you left your phone. Then I realized that she didn't even know you were here. I asked what was going on, and she burst into tears. She didn't say much, but she admitted that she had made a terrible mistake and asked me to tell you to call her. Jim, I know what it means when a wife or husband says they made a terrible mistake. Mom looked me straight in the eyes with sadness on her face. I tried to speak. I wanted to say that I caught Becky, but as I tried to say something, I realized that I couldn't. The words stuck and my eyes filled with tears. My reserved face, which I tried to maintain, disappeared and I began to cry. "Mom, I don't know. I don't know what's going on." Mom came over to me and I stood up. We hugged. I cried and felt like an 8-year-old child, but I didn't care. Becky's betrayal shook me to my core. I felt completely lost, but at least I felt love and security in my mother's arms. I was no longer sure if I could trust my old, safe places, but I knew I could trust my mother's love and desire to help me cope with the pain. "What did she tell you, Mom?" "I haven't spoken to her since I caught her in the act, cheating with her boss." "God, she didn't tell me that. The only thing she said was that she was very wrong, but that she still loves you and wants to talk. We stood there while I tried to pull myself together. Jim, I don't know what happened there, but she desperately wants to talk to you. She said she was ready to get in the car and come here, but I told her you might not want to talk to her. Then she decided to wait. I'm not sure I want to talk to her, Mom. Why should I talk to her? What will I say? All that comes to my mind is, you are a cheater and I want a divorce. Jim, you can't talk to her like that. Even if you saw everything, I taught you to talk to people respectfully. It's hard to believe that Becky could ever change you. There must be some incredible reason for this. At a minimum, you need to listen to her and get her version of events. What can she say to make a difference? What? My boss offered me $1 million to spend the night with him. Even that doesn't matter. I would still divorce her. Jim, I don't know. But you have to talk to her. Please. I know it will be hard, but you need to listen to her and understand what's going on before you decide what to do next. Talk at home alone. Emotions will run high, and you will need to speak frankly. But be careful and try not to give way to anger. This will not benefit either of you. Mom, I'm not going to hit her or anything. I know you won't do it, Jim. But trust me, for such a conversation, both will need help to control their emotions. It will be very difficult. It will feel like your heart is breaking. Mom spoke as if she had gone through it herself. I thought about asking her, but I wasn't sure I wanted to know, so I agreed with her. Okay, Mom, you're right. I think this needs to be done. I'm sure it will be terribly painful to listen to her explain why she betrayed me. But I think I have to get through this in order to move on. I'll do it. I'll set up a time to talk to her. Mom smiled at me. I saw pain in her eyes. Jim, this will be hard. I'm so sorry you have to go through this, but don't give up on Becky until you hear her out. People make mistakes. We all make mistakes. We are all human. You need to find out what she has to say. Mom glanced at my phone and made a hand gesture. She wanted me to take it. I looked at her with confusion, but realized that she wanted me to call Becky right now. Better do it now. Waiting won't make it any easier. I picked up my phone and pressed 1 on my favorites list. Becky answered after the second ring. I heard Becky say my name with difficulty. Jim? Becky was the only word I could say. I looked up and saw my mother quickly leave the kitchen. Suddenly, Becky found her voice. Jim, thanks for calling. Did your mom persuade you? She said she would do it. Thank her for me. There was a pause. Then she said, I'm so sorry for what you saw. I can't even imagine the pain I caused you. I heard her trying to hold back her tears. Jim, you have to believe me. I'm very sorry this happened. I never meant to hurt you. Now she was crying. Becky, what the hell? How could you? Am I not good enough for you in bed? Is this the point? And you went to sleep with that idiot boss? Does he have a larger size or a thicker wallet? Oh my God, Jim, no. This is not true at all. She was now sobbing loudly, choking between words. This is all such a huge mistake. I ruined everything. My whole life. I can't believe how much I ruined everything. She sobbed and tried to speak further, but I no longer understood what she was saying. Yes, a huge mistake. That's putting it mildly. And now you're going to have a big divorce because I don't want to be a part of your ruined life anymore. Oh God, no, Jim. Please don't say that. I love you. You have to understand, everything is out of control. Max slowly entered the room and stood next to me. He must have heard the tone of my voice and realized that I was in pain again. He turned and lay down at my feet, resting his head on his front paws. Becky, I don't know what got out of hand, but I'll give you one chance to explain yourself. I'll be back at Ock on Monday morning, but I won't be coming home. I'll stop by the house on Monday evening at 7. We can talk then, but I warn you, I want to hear the truth. If you start lying, I'll leave, and I won't stay in the house. I don't think there's anything you can say that will make me forgive you and come back, but I'm ready to come and listen to you. Thank you, Jim. I know if we see each other and talk, we will find a way to make things right. I love you so much, Jim, and I can't live without you. Please tell me that you still love me. You love me so much, right? Well, you have a strange way of showing it. I think you love me, but you especially love the size of your boss, don't you? Jim, please stop. This is wrong. Please don't say such things. I don't love anyone but you. Okay, Becky. See you Monday evening at 7. I didn't want to say I loved her or even say goodbye. And I didn't want to hear those words from Becky again, so I just hung up abruptly. I threw the phone on the table, leaned back, and stared into space. I really didn't want to date Becky. I was sure that it would be torture, but perhaps after our conversation I would be able to move on. I was going to let Becky know that divorce was inevitable and tell her to start preparing for it. I noticed movement out of the corner of my eye. Mom looked into the kitchen from behind the door frame. Are you okay? Yes, Mom. Max and I will be back at Monday morning, and I'll meet Becky that evening. Max stood up when Mom entered the kitchen. She leaned over and scratched him behind the ears. Then Mom noticed the bag of dog food we bought leaning against the cabinet. Are you hungry, boy? Max's tail swished and drummed against the table leg. Mom took a bowl out of the cupboard and poured food into it. She looked at me. Jim, if you want to get through this and stay with Becky, you need to get ready. You will have to put aside your pride and open your heart to forgive the person who has made a terrible mistake. I don't know why Becky did what she did, but I could tell from her voice that she was in a lot of pain. Obviously, she realizes her mistake and will beg you for forgiveness. I understand how bad you feel right now, but everything depends on you. You must decide whether to destroy your marriage or try to save it. You were put in a terrible position, but now you are in control of the situation. Just be patient and try to make decisions that you won't regret later. I know, Mom, but I can't imagine how I can forgive her. Mom looked at me with deep sadness in her eyes, but did not answer. Many found themselves in the same situation, but did not leave their spouses. I think they loved them so much that they decided to try again. Max stood next to his mother, looking at her expectantly, as if reminding her that his food had already been poured. His tail moved so that it seemed as if his whole body was swaying. When Mom put the bowl on the floor, Max attacked the food as if he hadn't eaten for several days. Apparently, he didn't like fast food as much as I thought he did. Becky. I woke up Sunday morning, but it seemed like I hadn't slept a wink. I'm meeting him tomorrow night, and he wants me to explain everything. He said that I should tell the truth. I know one thing. Tomorrow I cannot tell him the truth. The truth is too crazy, and Jim will never forgive me. I don't know how I got this far. It was like a path to destruction in which I had no option to choose any other route. Now I need to figure out what to say to Jim to minimize the damage. I know he loves me. Hopefully, if I play it right, he'll stay and eventually forgive me. Looking back, it all seems crazy. I lied on my resume to get the job I wanted. This was the job I was meant to do. I love developing advertising campaigns, and am good at it. In 2 years at Hartford, I proved this. But lying on a resume turned out to be a bad idea. My boss, Ken, did a background check on me a few months after I arrived and found that I didn't go to Stanford and didn't have a master's degree. I remember this moment like it was yesterday. Becky, come into my office, please. It was about 4 months after I arrived at Hartford, and the working day was almost over. Ken was furious. What the hell, Becky? I was going to promote you, but for this, I needed to confirm your data. I don't know how we missed this during admissions, but you didn't go to Stanford, right? I instantly realized that I was caught. And you don't have a master's degree, do you? The shock on my face said it all. No, Ken. Sorry, but I lied on my resume. I wasn't considered at all for the position I wanted, so I embellished it a little. A little? You indicated a master's degree from a prestigious university. This is not even close to true. I panicked. I was sure my career was over, and I was about to be escorted out of the building. Ken, I may not have that degree, but you have to admit that I helped develop the most successful campaign in years. Oh my God, Becky, you may be right, but do you understand what will happen when I tell Roger that you were hired under false pretenses? Most likely, I will be fired. The damage to the firm's reputation will likely cost us both our jobs. I started crying. I loved this job so much, I was happy to build my reputation, and now it was all falling apart. Ken, I'm sorry. I don't know what to say. Don't say anything, Becky. Just get out of my sight. I need to think about what to do next. I don't know what to do. Just go home, okay? I left. That night, I was in despair. I literally couldn't help myself, knowing that my job would almost certainly end and my reputation would be irrevocably destroyed. Everything I had worked so hard for was going to waste. Becky, are you okay? You look like your dog died. I didn't know what to say, so I just told Jim that Hartford was going to downsize and I might lose my job. Jim, as always, was supportive and cheerful. Sometimes it was terribly annoying. I was worried about everything, and Jim just lived as if everything always worked out for the best. I wasn't even sure if I should go to work the next day, but I went anyway. Ken didn't call me in, so I just continued with my duties. I was sure that the axe would fall at any moment. Every time the phone rang, I thought it was HR to hand me my termination notice. About 3 days later, Ken sent me a message asking me to come to his office at the end of the day. I was sure that I was finished. Becky, I've looked at every possible way out of this situation, and I don't see a way to get rid of your lying ass without damaging my career. So I'm considering not telling Roger or HR about your lies. Ken, thank you. I felt so relieved to know that maybe this nightmare wouldn't happen to me. Ken, if you can find a way to put this behind you, I will be forever grateful. Becky, if anyone ever finds out that I knew about your lies and did not fire you, I will be fired immediately. My reputation will be at stake if I allow this situation to continue. Ken, you won't regret it. I will be the best campaign designer this firm has ever had. Becky, this won't be free for you. I won't risk my reputation just like that. Compensation. What do you want, Ken? Do you want me to give you part of my salary? No, Becky. You'd have to give me half your salary for it to matter to me. And how do you explain this to Jim? No, I want something more personal. Something you have that will give me pleasure. Now I was completely puzzled, but this bewilderment did not last long. Becky, can I look at your breasts? I was absolutely shocked and categorically replied, no way. He said that he wouldn't risk his career for nothing, but he might be willing to take the risk if I agreed to give him a few pleasures. I stood there not believing my ears. Come on, Becky. You are a beautiful woman, and I have been fantasizing about how you please me. I'm a plus size, and you'll love it. I still couldn't find the words. I knew that if I sent him away, my job, and possibly my entire career, would be over. But will it save my career if I agree? He was over 50, but he was in good shape and looked good. In fact, I would go so far as to say that most women would find him attractive. Over the course of several months of work, I noticed that he was somewhat arrogant and self-important. But this was not uncommon in the advertising industry. Here you have to be quite aggressive to get ahead. I'm embarrassed to admit it, but I pleased Ken that night. I thought it would be a one-time situation. I'll do this, and that'll be the end of it. But I was wrong and took the path of the biggest mistake of my life. The next day, Ken behaved completely normally, but a couple of days later, he called me into his office again. It was during the working day, and I decided that it had to do with work. Over the past few days, I've been hoping that the resume incident was a thing of the past, but it hasn't given me peace, and I was right. Becky, I really liked what we did on Tuesday night. I understand that this was a surprise to you, but you did well and did a great job. I winced at his words. I'm sure you understand that it won't end here. He paused. I want more. So that you don't get nervous, I'll explain exactly what I want. I want sex with you, not just pleasure. I expected something like this, but I was still shocked. Ken, that will never happen. Wait, Becky, let me finish. I want sex once a week for 2 months. I know you're worried about cheating on your husband, but he'll never know. You know I'm a big size and women have said I know how to use it. I'm sure you'll like it too. You are a very sexy woman. Ken, I'm not going to sleep with you, and no, I won't like it. Do you think I'll enjoy cheating on my husband? Don't rush to conclusions, Becky. Your husband will never know about this, he said, pausing. Ken, I won't do this. Listen, think about this for a week. I know how much you love your job, but you screwed up and put me in a difficult position. Your work in advertising is really promising, and I am ready to help you. I'm sure you can make a name for yourself in this industry, but your mistake will cost you 8 times sex to be exact. Ken, I can't do this. You decide for yourself, Becky. Come next Thursday and be prepared to stay late. Tell your husband you have a mandatory management meeting this evening and you'll be back around 8. Or pack your things and leave this Friday. The choice is yours. If you come on Monday, I will know that you agreed. I came home that night and couldn't hide my emotions from Jim, so I told him that the layoffs at work were confirmed and I might be laid off. Jim encouraged me again and said that I should let my boss know that I was ready to do anything, even work for less money. And yet I still can't believe what I did the following Thursday night. Jim, it was Monday evening when I knocked on the door of my house. It just didn't feel right to walk in without knocking. While I was waiting for Becky to open the door, I looked across the street and saw Stan and Bridget looking out of their window. The door burst open. Jim, why are you knocking? Come in. I chuckled for a second. Yeah, I think Stan and Bridget are wondering too. I pointed at them across the street. To hell with them, Jim. They're just curious. I thought that maybe they were just worried about their neighbors, but I said nothing. Becky closed the door, and we looked at each other in silence for a few seconds. Becky stepped forward sharply and tried to hug me, but I raised my hand to stop her. She retreated. I noticed how tears began to appear in her eyes. I made crispy chicken, Jim. Do you want to try? Crispy chicken was my favorite dish, and its aroma filled the whole house. I knew Becky was trying to placate me. No, thanks, Becky. Let's just get this out of the way. I saw a couple of tears roll down her cheeks, but she didn't wipe them away, as if she didn't want to acknowledge them. I walked over to the couch and motioned for Becky to sit in the chair. Jim, I'm so sorry for what I did. I wish you didn't see this. These first words drove me crazy. Yes, of course. So you can keep having sex with him and cuckolding me, right? This stunned her, and tears now flowed freely. I, too, felt tears welling up in my eyes, but my anger allowed them to simply roll down. I stood up, went to the kitchen, pulled out a box of tissues, returned to the living room, and handed them to Becky. Becky, how could you do this to me, to us? I thought we were following your plan. I pointed to the kitchen, where our family plan hung. I didn't see the clause, having sex with your boss. Oh, Jim, it's not like that. This shouldn't have happened. This should never have happened. Then why, Becky? Explain this to me. Did you fall in love with him, or did you just get so turned on looking at him that you couldn't help yourself? It seems that Becky realized that the moment of truth had arrived. She began to stutter, trying to find the words. Now she was almost crying. So what did she do? Yes, she lied. Jim, it only happened once, when you caught us. He said he'd give me a big promotion if I did that, and you know how much I wanted to get promoted. Suddenly my brain was filled with rage, almost like that first night here, in this same room. I knew she was telling a lie. I saw them doing this when I caught them. They were clearly close lovers, and I knew she was lying about those management meetings on Thursdays. Becky thought I was so stupid that I couldn't put two and two together. Fuck you, Becky. This is a lie, I shouted with venom in my voice. No, no, Jim. Please believe me. You have to believe me. And this will never happen again. Her words were interrupted by sobs. Please, I'm so sorry. I need you to forgive me so we can make things right. So we can get back to our plan. To her damn plan. Fuck it all. Fuck you, Becky. I got up. I came here to hear the truth. And you're trying to feed me this nonsense. I'm leaving. Fuck your plan. I'm disappearing from your life. Find yourself another cuckold for your plan. I headed towards the door. Becky rushed towards me, but I pushed her away hard enough to make her fall. She landed on her butt in the middle of the living room and wasn't hurt, although I didn't care at the time. I ran out of the house and headed to my truck. It was a repeat of last week's events, but this time Becky wasn't going to let me go. She ran out of the house, screaming for me not to leave. I didn't care that she was screaming. I was going to leave. When I got into the truck, Becky disappeared behind it. I looked in the rearview mirror and saw her lying in the driveway behind my car. Damn it. To leave, I would have to run over her, and I, in my rage, considered it for a moment. But I didn't put the car into motion. I just sat there for a minute and then got out of the truck. Becky, get up or I'll really fucking run you over. Becky looked at me pleadingly in her eyes. Jim, if you come back to the house, I will tell you the whole truth. I swear, everything down to the last detail. I think this will destroy our marriage, but I'll tell you everything. I stood over Becky and looked down. I came here to find out what happened, so I pulled myself together and agreed. Okay, Becky, get up and let's go into the house. Jim, are you sure you want to hear this? We sat down again. I was on the sofa, and she was in the chair. Should we just agree that I made a huge mistake and try to find a way to fix it? This will never happen again. Do details matter? I got angry again. She broke my heart, destroyed our dreams, and acted like it could all just disappear. The desire to strangle her returned. Instead, I swept everything off the living room table and onto the floor. Magazines, 2 candy bowls, a box of tissues, and other things flew in different directions. No, Becky, speak now or I'll leave forever. You have 10 seconds before I'm out the door, and this time I will run over your ass if you jump in front of my truck. Jim, you have to promise to at least consider staying with me. What I did was terrible, but I can't live without you. You belong with me. Becky, start. And Becky began to talk. Everything down to the last detail. After half a minute, she stopped crying. Her face became emotionless. Apparently, the shock of the story made her indifferent. She told how it all started, how she lied on her resume, and how Ken pressured her for sex for 2 months. She then explained why things continued after those 2 months. It was almost the end of those 2 months, she said. Only a couple of weeks left. Ken and I did this on the couch in his office. As always, I was completely naked, and then Roger came in. Roger was the head of the company where Becky worked. He looked shocked at what we were doing and fired us both on the spot. I was silent, but Ken began to persuade him that we were valuable employees and our departure would harm the company. And then Ken, that arrogant bastard, suggested that I please Roger. Let her please you and then think, he said. She's great at it. I couldn't believe he was offering this to Roger and that Roger might be interested in it, but he was interested. I made Roger feel good that night. The next week, on what was to be my last Thursday, I walked into Ken's office. Ken and Roger were sitting at his table. Ken looked up, smiled, and said, Becky, Roger and I were just talking. He knows what I'm getting, and he wants more than just pleasure. Then Ken stood up. See you tomorrow, he said, walking past me to the door. Becky, why don't you take your clothes off for the big guy? Roger was less assertive and probably wouldn't have dared sleep with me, but apparently Ken orchestrated everything. I looked at Roger. He smiled as I began to take off my clothes. After we slept together, Roger said he wanted to do it again soon and that he thought I was enjoying my encounters with Ken. He spoke as if I was a willing participant and that we would do this regularly. At that moment, I realized what was expected of me and who I had become. I was an office girl of easy virtue, at least for 2 top managers of the company. Becky went silent and just looked at me as if she expected me to ask questions. Her face remained impassive. I was filled with anger and pain. How could you let this happen? When did this all start, Becky? About 5 months after I started working at Harvard, she answered dispassionately. Her lack of emotion was starting to scare me. What was going on in her head? 5 months after starting work? Seriously, you've been working there for almost 2.5 years. Have you been sleeping with one or the other of these guys once a week for the last 2 years? That means you've been slept with more than 100 times by someone other than me during our marriage. This figure stunned me, and I thought that Becky would realize the extent of her misdeeds and would snap. But this did not happen. She looked at me, still emotionless, and said, "Yes, I guess." Becky's actions were inappropriate for the situation. At first, she was upset and almost couldn't control herself. And now she acted like a robot, as if something was broken in her. I was shocked too. I'm shocked that my wife really turned out to be an office girl of easy virtue. Damn, Becky, I can't believe you could. I was interrupted by a loud knock on the door. Becky acted like she didn't hear, and I just sat there. I didn't know who it was, but let them go. Then the knocking was repeated, much louder and more insistent. "Oklahoma City Police, open the door," came a loud, angry voice from the other side of the door. Crap. Stan and Bridget called the cops. Perhaps they can be understood. Becky lying under my truck must have looked pretty crazy. I opened the door. "We received a call about disturbances in this house. Can we come in?" "There is no disturbance here, officer." I noticed how he looked over my shoulder and saw my zombified wife sitting on the sofa. She stared into space. Then I noticed things scattered on the living room floor. Everything looked bad. "Is this your wife, sir? We'd like to talk to her." I let them in, and after we introduced ourselves, I went into the kitchen to talk to one of the officers. The other stayed with Becky in the living room. I explained the situation without going into detail and said that I was angry, but that I would never touch Becky. "I wish I could," I added with a half laugh, trying to lighten the mood. The officer just looked at me over the notepad in which he was taking notes and did not smile. We walked back into the living room, and I looked at Becky. She talked to the cop and came to her senses a little. I noticed that a sad look appeared in her eyes again, and tears were flowing down her cheeks. "Sir, ma'am, we have no reason to arrest any of you, but the situation could be dangerous. We have seen situations like this get out of control, often." Then he looked straight at me. "Sir, I ask you to leave and not return here before tomorrow. Can you do this?" A few minutes later, the cops watched as I got into my truck and drove away. I headed back to the hotel. I needed to take Max for a walk. Becky called about half an hour after I was taken out of my own house. Sadness sounded in her voice again. "Jim, I'm sorry you had to listen to all this. I'm sorry for everything that happened. Everything got out of control. We need to finish our conversation. Can you come in the morning?" "No, Becky, I have work." "Do you have it too? Are you going to quit?" "I don't know, Jim. I don't know what to do." "Quit? Do you promise to come back if I quit?" "Becky, don't do anything hasty. We need time. I need time to think about everything." I thought that I needed to get away from this situation as quickly as possible. I wondered how quickly I could finalize my divorce, but something didn't seem right. "Becky, we can talk in a few days. I need time to think it over." "Jim, please don't let this be the end for us. Do me one favor. Don't sleep with them anymore. We'll talk later." Becky wrote to me every evening, begging me to come home and telling me she loved me. On Thursday evening, she wrote that there was no management meeting. I realized she was trying to say that she didn't sleep with her boss anymore. I wondered how much pressure she was under and how she resisted. I responded, thanking her for letting me know and telling her that I was heading to Kansas City to visit family over the weekend. She replied that she hoped we could talk again this weekend. I said it's too early. I never saw my lawyer Bob again. I don't know what was holding me back, but I had an uneasy feeling. I knew there was more to the story, and I needed to find out. Besides divorcing Becky, I wanted to find a way to get back at Ken and Roger. I had not yet decided whether it would be a beating or something else, but I knew that they would get what they deserved before the end of this story. I texted my mom that we were coming over for the weekend, and she wasn't surprised when only Max and I showed up. "How are you guys doing?" Mom asked when we entered the house. "It could be better, Mom, but we're holding on," I replied. Dad sat in his chair and watched the evening baseball game. I noticed it wasn't a Royals game. I think my mother didn't tell him about my situation, and he still had no idea about anything. I left you dinner in the oven. Now I'll take it out and feed you, said my mother. I sat down at the table and began to help myself to the lasagna that she placed in front of me. How are you and Becky doing, Jim? Mom asked. I spoke to her mother this week, but she doesn't seem to know anything. Jean didn't mention that you were having any problems. Well, we talked, but the police dispersed us before we could finish. I noticed the shock on my mom's face and hastened to add that no, I didn't hit Becky. After that, I explained what happened, although I didn't mention that Becky was sleeping with her boss's boss. I heard the front door open and Kyle's voice saying something to Dad. Jimbo, Kyle said loudly, entering the kitchen. Glad you're here. I need a drinking buddy today. Tracy is with a friend, so it's good that you came. Mom was putting food in Max's bowl and looked at us. You boys, no nonsense today. If anything happens, I will punish you both. I'm still your mother, you know. We arrived around 9 p.m. and Shooters was full of people. I haven't been here since my student days, but I was surprised that I still recognized some of the people. We played a couple of games at the pool and finally found a free booth. Kyle drank his beer in one gulp. I pulled mine, and there was still a full bottle on the table. You've always been a weakling, Kyle said. Never could compete with me. I understood the challenge and drained my beer. He knew that I could drink a lot, perhaps more than him, and tried to get drunk first. Hello, guys. So that's the meeting. I looked up. It was Tracy and her friend. Can I come to you? Jim, this is my friend Cindy. We were roommates in college our freshman year. We moved so they could sit down. They were dressed very elegantly. Cindy, like Tracy, was tall, with blonde hair and ample breasts that protruded from her deep cleavage. We just had dinner at the Rockery. They have great steaks, Cindy said. You need to catch up, Kyle added. Kyle ordered shots for everyone. If the girls caught up, then Kyle and I were just starting to get drunk. Cindy was flirtatious, often touched my arm, and it was nice for me to just go out and forget myself. I answered her the same. These shots are called kisses, Tracy said when the next order arrived. These are two different tastes that mix well. She winked at me. There were 2 green and yellow shots on the table. Tracy and Kyle each drank one of a different color and then kissed passionately. The more passionate the kiss, the better the taste. She winked again. Now it's our turn, Cindy said, smiling. We drank and she kissed me passionately. The taste is really great, I said, smiling and enjoying the moment. I don't remember how many of these kisses we did, but I got very drunk and got a lot of kisses. Waking up from the hangover haze, I felt a pleasant feeling in my groin. It seemed like someone was giving me pleasure. It was incredible, and I was on full alert. I looked down and saw Cindy doing it. It felt so good that I just relaxed and watched her movements for a few moments. She was clearly an expert in this matter. The morning sun made its way into the bedroom, and I realized that I was in an unfamiliar room. Is this Cindy's house? I tried to remember the events of last evening. Looking down, I saw her pleasuring me with obvious pleasure. My head began to clear up, and I finally began to think about something. Cindy, what am I doing here? How did I end up here? Desperately trying to remember the events of last night, I asked. Cindy rose a little higher. No, you were a gentleman. Or rather, you just passed out. But I am patient, and I knew that in the morning you would be ready. She smiled and leaned towards me again. Cindy, stop it, I said. I can't. I'm married. I know you're married, but let's forget about it for a while. She climbed on top, and at that moment, looking at her beauty and grace, I simply froze. She started moving, and it gave me incredible sensations. It was amazing. I leaned back, enjoying the moment. What a morning! This charming girl, with her radiant smile and graceful figure, was the embodiment of passion. She seemed completely captivated by what was happening, and I couldn't help but respond in kind. We spent some time together, enjoying the closeness and harmony of our movements. If she was looking for emotion and tenderness, I was ready to give everything to meet her expectations. We plunged into an atmosphere of mutual pleasure, and then, feeling slightly tired, I dozed off again. When I woke up again, I realized that she was ready to continue. Her attention and energy were amazing. I felt that I would remember this morning for a long time. We enjoyed each other, plunging into a passionate dance, where every minute was filled with emotions and warmth. When it was over, I was completely aware of where I was. Without the scum of desire, I began to feel remorse. Cindy, that was fantastic, but we shouldn't have done it. I'm married, and well, I'm not cheating, I said. Relax, Jim. As I said, I knew you were married. But you're a damn cute guy, and you gave me great sex. But Cindy, oh, that's enough, Jim. Kyle and Tracy told me you were having problems in your marriage and suggested that maybe you needed this. This made me angry. Oh, I see. So they asked you to do me a favor. No, it's not like that. They said you're a good guy, and if I like you, then I shouldn't worry about you being married. They said you were getting a divorce. I just looked at her, at this beautiful naked woman. She smiled at me. Jim, you're a good guy. I had a great time last night and this morning. I hope you do too. Cindy, I'm not sure I should have done this. You were amazing. One of the best, but... Cindy put a finger to my lips to silence me. Jim, I had a great time. If you leave your wife, I hope we can do this again. I put my number in your phone last night. Call me if things don't work out between you and your wife. I smiled at her. Thank you for a wonderful time, Cindy. I saw my phone on the nightstand. Called Uber. I had 10 minutes before the car arrived. I got dressed. If my marriage ends, I would love to meet you again. Well, to get to know you better. After these words, I walked out the door. It was only about 7 in the morning when the Uber dropped me off at my parents' house. Kyle's truck was parked in the driveway. Apparently, he spent the night here because it was close to the shooter's bar and he drank too much. Entering the house, I saw that he was sleeping on the sofa. I shook his shoulder to wake him up. Kyle, what the hell happened last night? I mean, Cindy and all that. Kyle squinted, trying to finally wake up. Tell me, big guy, he finally answered. You two looked great when you got into the taxi. I got angry and my voice rose. Kyle, you set everything up. You arranged for me to sleep with Cindy. I almost screamed. I noticed that Kyle was not looking at me, but somewhere past me with a blank expression on his face. I was about to say something else, but I looked back in the direction of his gaze. My mother stood in the doorway between the kitchen and living room with an angry look on her face. Oh, damn, was all I could say. Kyle arranged this all, Mom. I don't know where he found this Cindy, but she was amazing and very proactive. And I was drunk. Mom and I were sitting at the kitchen table, drinking strong coffee, which I so badly needed. Mom saw that I was upset and embarrassed. Jim, you don't need to explain anything to me. You're a grown man, she said. Then she paused and looked at me over her cup. I know you and Becky have problems, but... Wait, I suddenly interrupted her, staring into space. Then he looked at his mother again. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you, but I think I realized something. Mom looked at me with curiosity. This is something that has been bothering me for a long time, ever since Becky told her story. Remember how I said she lied on her resume, and when her boss found out, he blackmailed her into having sex? Yes, but I think I just realized what really happened. Mom, I know this sounds crazy, but I think her boss didn't find out about the lie on her resume until 4 months after she started working. I think he knew this from the very beginning. I think he knew this before he hired her. And he hired her anyway, so that he could use it against her later. I paused for her to process my words. He gave her the job, told her how wonderful she was, how well she was doing, and talked about a promotion. He knew that her career was very important to her. And then he suddenly discovered a mistake in his resume in order to get sex from her. Jim, this is crazy. Do you really think that's how it happened? I'm sure, Mom. I can bet anything that it was so. This doesn't take Becky's guilt away, but it does change my perspective on the situation a little. I was silent for a minute, thinking about what I had heard. Jim, you. Mom, I need to talk to Becky again. They set you up. It was Sunday evening. Max, me, and Becky were in the living room of our house. I sat in a chair opposite Becky, who was on the couch, and began to tell her about my suspicions. Do you really think so? This sounds crazy. Yes, you told me that shortly before the end of 2 months with Ken, Roger found you. And then he made it clear that everything would continue. It looks like they both set it up. I think this was their plan all along. They knew you couldn't stop it once Roger caught you and demanded yours. Jim, this is almost incredible. Becky, who does a background check 4 months after they hire someone. They should have known about your deception from the very beginning. Becky's shoulders slumped, her lower lip trembled, and her eyes filled with tears. Jim, I was so stupid. I allowed my pride and ambition. She couldn't finish her sentence and started crying loudly. I let it destroy my marriage. Max jumped onto the couch and stood next to Becky, looking into her eyes. She hugged him, continuing to cry. I was silent. After a few moments, Max lay down next to her and rested his head on her leg. I felt how he empathized with her. He knew she was suffering and it hurt him. To be honest, it hurt me too. As much as I wanted to hate this woman for what she did to us, it was painful to see her suffer. When this all started, I took Max with me as if he were my dog, my property. But I knew that he and Becky were truly best friends. This dog loved her unconditionally. He loved her as if none of this had ever happened, because for him it really had never happened. I wanted my love to be as unconditional as Max's. For the first time since all this started, I felt sorry for her. It still shocked me that my innocent wife, who I thought could sleep with two of her bosses, had done this on a weekly basis for over a year. But now I was sure that she was really targeted by these two scoundrels. Suddenly my path forward with Becky wasn't so clear anymore, but I knew I'd get my revenge on those two bastards. Well, I won't have to deal with them anymore, Jim. I quit last Friday. Last week Ken brought up our management meetings again, and I knew it would never happen again. So on Friday I came and quit. Becky was already sobbing out loud. Please, Jim, don't leave me. I know you probably hate me now, but I need you. Please do not leave me. Okay, Becky, I don't know what will happen to us in the long term, but tomorrow I will come back here and sleep in the guest room. We need to figure out how to get revenge on these two. We can go see my lawyer next week and see if he thinks we can sue. Becky's eyes lit up and she looked straight at me. Oh my God, Jim, are you serious? Thank you. I promise to make amends. You won't regret coming back. Becky, I didn't say I'd be back forever, but I'll come back and try to figure everything out. Jim, can Max stay with me tonight? I missed you both so much. I stood up and walked over to Becky. Leaning over, I kissed the top of her head. Then I bent down and scratched Max behind the ears. See you tomorrow evening. Oh my God, Jim was returning. It was late Monday, and I was delighted. I already cleaned the house and went to the store. The roast was in the oven. I also got my hair cut and my nails done. It felt like I was getting ready for our first date. I know he said it might not be long, but I didn't want to think about it. Jim might have been upset about all my preparations, but I didn't care. I wanted him to understand how important this day was to me. I planned to start unobtrusively. I'll let him sort things out, but I'll make sure he has a bottle of Fat Tire. He recently said it was his new favorite beer. Next, I wanted to make sure dinner included all of his favorite foods. And then I wanted him to know that I still loved him. I prayed that he wouldn't reject me. I didn't know if I could fix everything. Jim was a traditional man. When we got married, he said he didn't care if I worked. He wanted to take care of me and have children as soon as possible. And then I wanted to build a career before we had children. Now all I wanted was Jim back. I still saw our common future, together with our children. Jim was the man I wanted by my side. a provider, a protector, and a good lover. But I ruined everything because I wanted to get everything at once and was willing to lie to get it. Now I didn't have a job, and I wasn't sure if I still had a husband. But I had one trump card. I had a new plan. That evening, Jim knew that I did everything to please him, but he didn't show it. At dinner, Jim said we had an appointment with his lawyer. Jim, I didn't know you had a lawyer. I felt tears fill my eyes, realizing why he might need it. Becky, I did meet with him about us, but if we contacted him about the lawsuit, he said he couldn't represent me in the divorce case. I didn't know what to say. I just looked at Jim, feeling tears rolling down my cheeks. Becky, please, let's tackle one issue at a time. We'll talk to the lawyer tomorrow, and then you and I can talk things over. I wiped my tears. I didn't want this evening to become difficult, so I tried to smile. We're having strawberry cake for dessert. White sponge cake with liquid strawberry jelly soaked in the cake layer, topped with a light vanilla glaze. This was another one of Jim's favorite desserts. I didn't care that my intentions were obvious. All that mattered was that he seemed to enjoy the cake. Becky, thank you for a great dinner and company. I have to go to my room. I have to get up early tomorrow. He got up from the table. I jumped up. Jim, why don't you go to our room? I have new lingerie. I think you'll like it. And then you can enjoy me. Becky, that's not why I came back, and I don't think it's a good idea. But maybe if there was a desk there, I would bend you over it. The insult was so unusual for Jim. I was so shocked that I felt like I had been physically hit. I could hardly speak. Jim, please don't say such things. Tears rolled down my cheeks again. We stood and looked at each other for a while. Becky, I'm sorry for those words. It was cruel. Then he turned around and went upstairs to the room he now called his own. God, I hurt this man terribly. I went to our bedroom alone. It's good to see you again, Bob. A couple of weeks have passed since our first meeting when we discussed my situation and possible divorce. This is my wife, Becky. Nice to meet you, Becky, Bob said and shook her hand. He motioned for us to sit opposite his old table. There were tall stacks of files on the table, and he removed one of them so that Becky would not be disturbed. The situation has changed a little, and we need advice. Jim, I cannot advise Becky if I am representing you in a divorce proceeding. As I said yesterday on the phone, I would like you to give us advice on another matter. Is there something we can discuss with you that isn't divorce-related? Yes, I think it's possible. But if you decide to move forward with your divorce, you will have to hire another lawyer. It's not a problem. We are here to discuss possible sexual harassment and get your advice regarding your claim. I'll let Becky tell you what happened. Becky told her story, and then I added my suspicions that they knew about it all along. I think those bastards knew she falsified her resume before Hartford even hired her. I think they did this all on purpose. Bob nodded. Yes, most likely it was so. Looks like it. So, do you think we have grounds for a claim? It would be great to make them pay for what they did. Yes, definitely. But first and foremost, you need to think about Becky's vulnerability. If we move forward, everything that happened to Becky will become public knowledge. To succeed, they will need to understand that we are willing to go all the way, revealing everything. I looked at Becky. There was a pained expression on her face, but she didn't say anything. Okay, Bob, we'll discuss this among ourselves and make a decision. But Jim, Becky, this is much more serious than just a lawsuit. What they did was a crime. They have committed many criminal offenses and should be arrested. Crime? Yes, blackmail, sexual harassment, coercion, extortion, that's just part of it. It is illegal to solicit sex from an employee for any reason. They should be arrested for the crimes they committed. Do you think they can be arrested? Yes, definitely. If the police can prove they knew Becky falsified her resume before they hired her, it won't be hard. And if not, they will most likely pursue the case anyway. Wow, I didn't think about that, I said. Becky and I sat stunned. Of course, if they are arrested, it will become public knowledge. Becky's name could be disgraced when the media finds out about this. Technically, the victim's name should remain anonymous, but this is rarely observed. Bob fell silent, letting us digest the information. Becky and I looked at each other and didn't say a word. You need a little time to think things over and decide what to do next. I, of course, recommend that you report this to the police and make these scoundrels suffer the punishment they deserve. It must be taken into account that this may not be the first time they have used this trick. These are predators and will continue to prey on their victims until they are brought to justice. Becky and I walked out of Bob's office in silence. Everything turned out to be much more serious than we thought. As an abused man, I wanted the worst possible retribution for these two, but that meant the truth about Becky would be known to everyone. Family, friends, former colleagues, everyone will know what happened. The next morning, when I went downstairs, I saw Becky already sitting in the kitchen with a cup of coffee. "Good morning," I said. "Jim, I've thought about this a lot. For me, the solution turned out to be quite simple. I can't let them get away with it and put other women in the same danger. I want to go to the police." Becky and I met with Don again that same day. We told him we wanted to file a claim and talk to the police. We gave statements to detectives that same day. They were very interested in our story. A couple of days later, we received a call from a detective whom we had not seen before. He was from the sex crimes unit and suggested that Becky go undercover to Hartford with a recording device. "Hi, Becky. It's good to see you again." "Hi, Ken. How are you?" I carefully applied my makeup and put on a light dress that ended just above my knees. It was difficult, but we hoped to use Ken's arrogance against him. "Ken, I miss working in Hartford. Would you consider the possibility of me returning?" "I don't know, Becky. Your attitude will have to change a lot. We're still taking a risk by hiring you. You lied on your resume to get this job." "I know, Ken, but I need this job, and I miss—" I stopped mid-sentence, hoping that he would take the bait. "Are you and Jim still together, Becky?" I nodded. Ken grinned. The scoundrel seemed to relish the thought that Jim would agree to such terms. "Becky, if you come back, you will have to attend our management meetings on Thursdays. Do you both understand this?" Ken smiled. I tried to look hesitant. "Ken, I'm not sure. I don't think my Jim." "Nonsense, Becky. Your weapon husband now knows what happens on Thursdays. You wouldn't be here if you weren't going to get back to me having sex with your sweet body. And he knows that too, doesn't he?" I nodded again. I couldn't believe his confidence, although I probably could have. It was limitless. I lowered my head and nodded modestly as if I had come to terms with it. "Ken, did you know this whole time?" I spoke softly, trying to look as submissive as possible. "Did you know I lied on my resume before you hired me?" "Who cares, Becky? Everything is fine with us. Great for me, great for Roger, and I might add, great for you too. But you knew this when you hired me." "Of course I knew, but now it doesn't matter anymore." I knew that the police had already received the necessary evidence, and it was the turn of the second part of the plan. "Ken, it was so hard for me. You know, I never wanted this. I never wanted sex." "Oh, Becky, forget it. I think you've learned to have fun. You said to yourself that you like it when I spank your ass, and now you want to come back for another course of treatment." "But I kept telling you that I wanted to stop, and you and Roger kept saying that this would end soon." "Well, this definitely won't end now. You'll be happy to be back. I know you love my plus size." I heard a noise outside the door, but Ken didn't seem to notice. He was too busy bragging about his sexual accomplishments. "By the way, I think I want to have some fun to seal the deal. Close the door, honey, and come here." I jumped up. I hoped the noise outside the door was the police, but if not, I was getting ready to run out of the room. Fortunately, as soon as I approached the door, the police opened it. I stepped back and stared at Ken. "Fuck you, Ken," I screamed. "Today I had you wrapped around my little finger, and for the first time it brought me real pleasure." I heard Ken making excuses as he was taken out of the office, insisting that he had done nothing and that I was just a girl of easy virtue who liked everything. I ran out into the street. Jim was standing in the parking lot behind some police van. I ran up to him and hugged him tightly. "This is the end," I said, breathless. Over Jim's shoulder, I saw Ken and Roger being placed in separate police cars. Their faces expressed a mixture of anger and confusion. Now they will get what they deserve. "We got them, Jim. We got them." We were still hugging. "Did you hear? Did you hear what he said? This arrogant bastard has completely betrayed himself and even got Roger involved." I heard every word. That night, I took Becky to a restaurant and we celebrated the victory. Becky was excited and in high spirits, but my mood was more subdued. I was glad that Ken and Roger would get what they deserved, but I knew I was at a crossroads. I had to make decisions about the future of our marriage. When we got home, Becky offered herself to me sexually. I think she hoped that the euphoria of the day would carry over into our bedroom and that this would help us restore intimacy. But I refused. I saw that my depressed mood puzzled her. I headed to the kitchen. He opened the pantry, took out dog food, and poured it into Max's bowl. Then he sat down at the kitchen table and watched Max greedily eat his food. After a while, I heard Becky's footsteps and raised my head. "Jim, it's over. I know there's more trial and litigation ahead of us, but can you and I put this behind us?" I just looked at her without saying anything. Becky's face was blank. She just stared into my eyes. I was still silent and saw how tears began to appear in her eyes. She began to understand that this was not the end for me. We sat at the table without saying a word. I think she decided to give me space because at some point she simply got up from the table and silently went into the bedroom. That night, I thought for a long time about everything that happened. Becky lied on her resume, and her asshole bosses took advantage of it. I wanted to understand and forgive, but Becky put herself in this situation and then agreed to have sex with them to get out of this mess. I tried to understand why she could do such a stupid thing. Something she knew I find unforgivable. These thoughts were running through my head over and over again. It was Thursday. Just 3 weeks ago, my life was turned upside down. I tried to look at everything from different angles, weigh the good and the bad. Imagine what life will be like if I make this or that decision. At 1 o'clock in the morning, I drank a large glass of whiskey, hoping it would help me sleep. It did calm my mind a bit, and soon I felt tired and went to bed. "Becky, good morning." It was 9 in the morning, a working day. I got up around 7, but Becky didn't work and got some sleep. She went to the coffee maker and poured herself a cup of coffee. "Are you taking another day off?" she asked. I didn't answer, but just looked at her as she sat down at the table. Becky took a sip of coffee and gave me a surprised look. "Becky, we need to talk." She almost dropped her cup on the table. There was fear in her eyes. "Jim, we're moving forward. Please be patient. I beg you." "Becky, I thought about the situation for a long time after you went to bed. I don't see my opinion changing over time." I paused and we looked into each other's eyes. I saw her eyes fill with tears. I decided. Now tears came to my eyes and I could not utter words. I decided that we need a divorce. "Oh God, no, Jim. Please." Becky's lips began to tremble, and I noticed how her hands began to shake. "I know that I am not without guilt. I'm so sorry for what happened and what I did, but those bastards set me up, Jim." There was a pleading expression on her face. "I shouldn't have had sex with them, but I did it to protect my career so we could save money and buy a house faster and start having children. You know this was our plan." "That's it, Becky. You had all these plans, and look where they got us. You tried to control everything, and for this you were ready to sell your soul. Maybe not your soul, but definitely your body. I'm still not sure you didn't like having sex with your bosses. Maybe Ken really made you feel pleasure, as I heard when he found you that evening." "No, Jim, I was just stroking his ego so that he would finish faster." She cried bitterly. "Even if that's the case, you still gave them your body for financial gain." And this makes you, a girl of easy virtue." Becky screamed loudly and said something incoherent. She shook her head from side to side, and tears streamed down her face. "Becky, you slept with these people at least once a week, maybe more often. I don't know." This went on for almost 2 years. This means that during our marriage, another man had you about 100 times. I'm glad we don't have children yet. We're young, we can both start over. We can both meet someone else and move forward. I'm sorry, I know it sounds cold, but after what you did, I just can't imagine you being the mother of my children. Tears streamed down Becky's face, but she nodded her head in agreement, as if she understood. She knew me, and despite all the pain this would bring us, she understood that I had made a decision. There was simply no way for us to move forward as a couple. She lowered her head onto the table and began to cry. I got up from the table and headed to the guest room to collect the rest of my things. I got up early and already packed my car. Becky looked up as I appeared in the kitchen doorway. We were silent for some time. "I'll call you soon, and we'll discuss what needs to be done." "I love you, Becky. I think in some way I will always love you. At first I was very angry, but now I'm just hurt. I know that you are suffering too. We don't have much property, so our divorce should be easy. Let's agree on an amicable divorce and move on with our lives." Becky looked at me with a sad expression on her face, not saying anything. I walked out of the kitchen into the living room. Max was lying on the sofa. I scratched his ears and then leaned down and pressed my face to his. "Thank you for being there when I needed you, Max." I got up and left the house, and with it, out of our marriage. It was all over, only formalities remained. Over the next few weeks, Becky and I spoke on the phone several times. We negotiated a quick divorce through a lawyer, a guy Bob recommended. When I talked to Bob, he warned me that if we divorced now, all the money from the lawsuit would go to Becky. I didn't care, I just wanted to move on. For me, revenge in the form of the arrests of Ken and Roger was enough. Without dispute on either side, the divorce was finalized in 60 days. I felt relieved, but the sadness did not leave me for several more months. I kept thinking about how much good we had and wished Becky had made different decisions. Lying on my resume was a huge mistake, but agreeing to have sex with Ken was a big deal for me. In her desire to control everything and build an ideal life, she made rash decisions. It hurt not only us, but others as well. I'm sure her parents were shocked that she would humiliate herself like that, but I never talked to them about it. I read on the internet that Ken and Roger received prison sentences. In addition to Becky's testimony and the police tape, the head of HR at Hartford testified that they reviewed Becky's resume before hiring and knew it was fraudulent. Roger paid the HR employee a hush bonus. It seems that he received immunity for cooperating with the investigation. Ken received 4 years, Roger 3. I think they will serve about half of their sentences. Ken was not married, but Roger was married for 26 years. His wife divorced him and received most of his share of the company. About 6 months after the incident, Hartford settled the lawsuit with Becky. I wouldn't have even known about it if I hadn't received a certified letter with a check from Becky for $800,000. She included a note with a check. She wrote that she returned to Kansas City and, after a course of therapy, realized how much pain she had caused me. She apologized, saying that she had mistakenly put her life and plans ahead of the love we had and our marriage. Her desire to control everything became her downfall, and she wrote that in the future she would try to live one day at a time. I couldn't believe she decided to give me half of her settlement, but she wrote that I deserved at least that much, maybe more. It took a while to start dating again. About a year after our divorce, I met a girl through mutual friends, and we started dating. We've been together for a couple of months now. I'm not sure yet if I'm ready to truly love again, but I want a family, and I'm sure that over time this will happen. For now, it's just me and my trusty new golden retriever, Sally. End. Subscribe to our channel so that your love doesn't cheat on you, and go ahead and listen to the next story, because this story is nothing compared to the next one. If you're under 18, don't even think click to the next one.